In the Mediterranean region, the Southern Festoon flies in a single generation from the end of March to the end of May and favours mesophytic grasslands, banks of rivers or lakes, clearings, wet spots in the Garrigue, and the edges of cultivated areas where small, much localized populations live. In the early morning, this southern festoon rests, its antennae positioned towards the rear. As soon as the temperature rises above 18 degrees, it gets going. And then opens its wings to increase the intake of warmth from the sun's rays. This spring butterfly feeds mainly in the morning on a variety of flowers to top up its energy. Males emerge ahead of the females and stay close to where they emerge. Very territorial. The male patrols energetically over its territory with a low and persistent flight, or defends its territory from a perch in the low vegetation. From time to time, it makes a small inspection tour and chases away other males and butterflies of its size. The darker variant, Cassandra, flies in the midi. The hind wings are adorned with more pronounced blue spots, and carmine red adorns the orbs. The underside of its forewings is marked with red spots. A male rushes to meet a freshly emerged female and catches her in mid-air between its wings, and mating ensues. At first, the couple is stomach to stomach, the male wrapping the female with its wings folded forward. And then they maneuver into the typical mating position of butterflies, back to back. The sexes are similar, although the female is a little larger and has a bigger abdomen. In the south, Its preferred plant is the round-leaved Birthwort, which has round leaves fixed directly to the stem and has tubular flowers. Once fertilized, and without delay, the female lays her eggs on both sides of the leaves of the host plant. In Provence, the Southern Festoon usually lays her eggs individually. But sometimes the female lays 2 or more eggs on the same leaf. An egg is laid on a leaf where eggs of different stages have already been deposited, and of which 2 have already hatched. Often, females move away from where they emerged and venture along streams, and by doing so, spread into other localities where round-leaved Birthwort grows. The flowers of the round-leaved Birthwort have a powerful smell, and perhaps the Southern Festoon is able to detect it from a greater distance. As long as there are flowers with nectar to feed on, this pioneer butterfly ventures further. The egg incubates for between 10 and 14 days, and the first eggs hatch roughly the same time as flowering commences. Here the caterpillar nibbles a hole in the shell in order to free itself from the egg. The caterpillar goes in search of a round-leaved Birthwort flower in which to shelter and feed on from inside. It will stay there, well hidden, until its first moult. At its second instar, it attacks the flap of the flower and consumes it almost entirely. Then heads towards another flower, rich in protein. From time to time, the caterpillar rests. At its third instar, the dorsal spines become orange, characteristic of the Southern Festoon. More mobile, the caterpillar sometimes moves between round-leaved birthwort plants in search of flowers. As soon as the sun is at its peak, the caterpillar goes in search of a shady spot under a leaf. And then resumes its activities at the end of the afternoon. The caterpillars of the Southern Festoon spin silk along their path, an extra security like a real lifeline. It's possible to see caterpillars of different stages on the same plant, as here where a second instar caterpillar passes by on a leaf next to a fourth instar caterpillar. And see here third and fourth instar caterpillars feeding. They tolerate each other, although the youngest is weary of the elder. Finally, the youngest leaves to find another flower. Here the parasitoid wasp, polyxena, which is entirely dependent on caterpillars of the genus Zerynthia for the development of its offspring. The wasp is not interested because the caterpillars are too large. They drop, sensing the danger. The parasitoid wasp returns. And detects with its antennae that there is no young caterpillar in this flower tube. The basket stinkhorn, red coral in colour, grows in the leaf litter. It is common in Provence, and it's shaped like a wire lantern. Its pungent smell attracts flies and other insects, which help to disseminate its spores. And here is the predator of these small insects, the western three-toed skink, which frequents these same ecosystems. This caterpillar is ready for its third moult. At its fourth instar, the caterpillar is pinkish in colour with an orange head. At its last stage, the caterpillar has grown considerably and becomes paler in colour. It feeds non-stop. Without worrying about destroying the refuge of a small late-emergent caterpillar. The mature caterpillar orientates and then moves towards a dense tuft of grass. In which it weaves a loose silken net. While pushing and pressing its body to provide adequate space. At the end of 3 days, the metamorphosis begins. So as not to attract predators, the chrysalis gets rid of its old skin. It seems exhausted and needs to regain its strength. The chrysalis is held by a silk belt. Once the chrysalis has hardened, It is very well camouflaged and looks like a twig. Look at the little brush with hooked bristles on the tip of its head. Several days later, the chrysalis squirms vigorously, and the silken belt is moved to the hooked brush. A second round follows. Joining the two silken threads, thus securing the chrysalis to the twig. In the autumn, the round-leaved birthwort disappears completely. The chrysalis overwinters well protected from the cold inside the grass. The next spring, just before emergence, the chrysalis squirms energetically. And some days later, the butterfly appears. It climbs higher up the vegetation, preparing to fill out its wings. The wings inflate as hemolymph is pumped into them. But not all chrysalises give butterflies. Here is the emergence hole characteristic of the Parasitoid Wasp, Agrippon polyxena. Although the Southern Festoon is on the red list of protected butterflies in France, the wild places where the life cycle of this butterfly takes place are not, and unfortunately in the Midi, endangered and decline every year. It is essential to preserve habitats of the round-leaved birthwort in our beautiful Provençal countryside to protect the offspring of this exotic-looking iconic butterfly.